The attack came without warning. Kepler 62F had been a quiet colony, a testament to humanity's resilience among the stars. Families had built homes in the dense, oxygen-rich forests, and children had grown up beneath the planet's dual suns, believing they were safe. But safety was an illusion. The Vorten Empire shattered it in a single night. The massacre began at dusk when the sky turned violet, and the air hummed with the unnatural energy of approaching warships. The colonists had little time to react. Defense systems, designed for pirates and stray asteroids, were useless against the precision of Vorten dreadnoughts. Orbital bombardments turned settlements into craters, and the ground forces moved in methodically. Vorten soldiers, clad in reflective black armor, slaughtered without hesitation. Screams carried through the burning ruins. Among the dead was Gabriel Voss, a former Earth soldier turned farmer, his wife Elise, and their 2 children. Gabriel had fought back, managing to take down 2 Vorten warriors before being overwhelmed. His last moments were spent shielding his son with his own body, though it did nothing against the pulse rifle's blast that tore through them both. His daughter, barely 8, was dragged from the wreckage, her terrified cries cut short with the cold efficiency of a Vorten executioner's blade. By the time the colony's distress beacon reached Earth, it was too late. The footage played in a darkened war room aboard the UHF flagship Indomitable. A single hollow projection captured the horror, grainy, flickering images of fire and death, punctuated by the distorted screams of dying families. The video ended, leaving only silence. Across the room, a figure sat motionless, watching the empty screen. Leon Voss barely breathed. His hands were clenched so tightly his knuckles turned white, and the muscles in his jaw twitched beneath his stubbled face. He had always known war. He had fought in the blood-soaked campaigns against the Vordal Raiders, had walked through burning wreckage in the Zeta Rebellion. But this was different. This was family. Celine sat beside him, her posture deceptively relaxed. Unlike Leon, whose anger simmered beneath the surface, hers was cold and calculated. Her sharp features were unreadable, but her fingers tapped idly against the table's metal surface, a sign, to those who knew her, of barely restrained fury. Across from them, Admiral Kaito folded his hands, the deep lines on his face more pronounced than usual. "The Vorten royal family ordered this," he said finally. "No provocation, no warning, just an extermination." His dark eyes met Leon's. "We have options." Celine spoke first. "Not war." "No," Kaito agreed. "A full-scale conflict would cost billions of lives. The Vorten fleet outmatches ours 3-1. But if their leadership were to fall..." Leon exhaled slowly. He knew where this was going. He and Celine weren't just soldiers. They were something far more dangerous. "You want us to kill them?" he said flatly. "Yes." Kaito's voice was steady. "The Emperor, his 3 heirs, the High Chancellor, wipe them from existence." Celine's lips curved slightly. Not a smile, something sharper. "Make it look like an accident?" "No," Kaito said. "Make it loud." Leon and Celine prepared in silence. Their weapons were custom-built, modified over years of Black Ops missions. Celine's knives, forged from a near-indestructible alloy, were small enough to be concealed in her sleeves. Leon's pulse rifle had a custom grip worn smooth from use. They carried other tools, of course, disruptors, cloaking tech, poisons, but in the end it always came down to precision. A blade in the dark, a bullet that found its mark. Their ship was a stolen Vorten freighter, scrubbed of identification. It was small, fast, and, most importantly, capable of slipping past border security unnoticed. They boarded in silence, neither speaking as the engines flared to life and the stars stretched into the infinite. As they left Earth's orbit, Leon finally turned to Celine. "You don't have to do this." Celine's gaze met his, unreadable. "Yes, I do." He didn't argue. They both knew the truth. The Vortens had made a mistake. They hadn't just slaughtered humans. They had taken something from them. Now, Leon and Celine would take everything. The stolen Vorten freighter hummed softly as it drifted through the vast void of space, blending into the endless stream of merchant and military vessels bound for Vortani's prime. From the outside, it was unremarkable. A battered cargo hauler, its hull scarred by old skirmishes. Inside, however, the ship's true occupants were anything but ordinary. Leon sat in the cockpit, his fingers resting lightly on the controls, eyes scanning the incoming data feeds. The planetary defense grid was as formidable as expected. Dozens of warships patrolled the orbit, their sensor arrays capable of detecting even the most sophisticated cloaking technology. It didn't matter. They weren't sneaking in, they were walking through the front door. Celine stood behind him, her arms crossed, her gaze fixed on the massive planet that grew larger in the viewport. Entry codes ready? Leon tapped the console, bringing up a string of encrypted data. Courtesy of our friends in the underworld. As long as nobody looks too closely, we're just another crew of mercenaries looking for work. She studied him for a moment, then nodded. Then let's get to work. The moment their ship entered Vortani's prime's upper atmosphere, they were hailed by an orbital security station. A gruff voice, speaking heavily accented standard, crackled through the comms. Freighter Caverns Bounty. State your cargo and purpose. Leon leaned forward. Mercenary unit, recently contracted for escort detail. Manifest attached. He transmitted the forged documents, pulse steady as the seconds dragged. The voice responded after a pause. Docking Bay 72. Proceed and prepare for inspection. Leon cut the transmission, exhaling slowly. We're in. Celine placed a hand on his shoulder, squeezing briefly. One step closer. The freighter landed with a heavy thud inside a cavernous docking bay. The city beyond the blast doors stretched endlessly. A sprawl of neon-lit districts, towering monoliths of glass and steel, and the looming, ominous silhouette of the Imperial Citadel. Their true destination. A group of Vortan security officers approached the ship, their black armor glinting under the harsh docking lights. Leon and Celine moved with practiced ease, stepping down the ramp as if they belonged. The lead officer, a thick-set Vortan with a deep scar running down his scaled cheek, gave them a cursory glance. Identification. Celine handed over the forged mercenary IDs, her expression unreadable. The officer scanned them, waiting for the system to process the data. Tension coiled beneath Leon's skin. If the forgeries failed, this would turn violent fast. The scanner beeped green. The officer grunted. Stay out of trouble. Leon smirked. No promises. They stepped past the guards, vanishing into the labyrinth of the city. The next phase of the mission required them to establish themselves within the underworld. The Vortan nobility rarely dealt with outsiders unless forced to, but criminals, bounty hunters, and warlords, they thrived in the shadows, and the right connections would open doors that traditional diplomacy never could. They found their way to a dimly lit establishment known as the Ember Pit, a den of illicit dealings, blood sport, and whispered secrets. The air was thick with the scent of alien spices and the metallic tang of blood. Gladiatorial matches played out in an open arena at the center of the room, where combatants fought to the death for the entertainment of drunken patrons. A towering Vortan with deep crimson scales and cybernetic enhancements lounged on an elevated platform, flanked by heavily armed guards. This was Surik, an influential crime lord whose operations reached into the very heart of the Empire's elite. Celine approached without hesitation, her eyes locking onto Surik's. We need information. The crime lord chuckled, his voice a low, guttural purr. Information comes at a price, human. Leon tossed a small holoprojector onto the table. It activated, displaying a detailed blueprint of a heavily secured estate, the residence of Prince Zalric, the youngest of the Emperor's heirs. Our price is blood, Celine said, voice calm. We're taking him off the board. Surik's amusement faded, replaced by interest. The Vortan noble houses had no shortage of enemies, and an opportunity to shift the balance of power was always enticing. After a long pause, Surik leaned forward. Very well, assassins. I'll provide you with access codes to the estate's outer perimeter. But if you fail, I never met you. Leon smirked. We don't fail. The mission was set. Under the cover of night, They infiltrated the prince's estate, slipping past automated sentries and bioscanners. The palace was a testament to excess. Towering spires, grand halls lined with priceless artifacts, and an air of untouchable arrogance. Zalric was everything they expected. Cruel, complacent, and utterly unaware of the danger that stalked his halls. He lounged in a private chamber, surrounded by sycophants and concubines, sipping on an exotic liquor as he laughed over the colony's destruction. Selene struck first. A blade, quick and silent, found its mark in the throat of the nearest guard. The room erupted into chaos. Leon followed, firing precise shots that cut down the remaining opposition before anyone could react. The prince stumbled backward, eyes wide with disbelief. Wait. Selene's pistol leveled with his forehead. No! A single shot ended him. By the time the alarms blared, Leon and Selene had vanished into the night, leaving behind a message in blood. Humanity was watching. The first of the royal family had fallen, and they were just getting started. The assassination of Prince Zalric sent shockwaves through the Vorten Empire. Panic spread like wildfire among the ruling class. Nobles bolstered their security, and the Imperial Guard locked down the capital, Vortanis Prime, in an iron grip. The death of an heir was not just an attack. It was a declaration of war. Leon and Selene listened to the broadcasts from a shadowed hideout in the lower districts, deep within the industrial sprawl of the planet. The news anchors spoke in clipped, controlled tones, but the fear in their voices was unmistakable. The Emperor himself had issued a decree. The assassins would be found, and they would die screaming. Leon shut off the holofeed. We've got their attention. Selene leaned against the wall, arms crossed. Now we see how they respond. The answer came quickly. By nightfall, every mercenary, bounty hunter, and imperial operative with a pulse had been given one order: find the humans. Surik, despite his influence, had gone silent, and they knew better than to reach out. Their only allies now were the weapons at their sides and the relentless purpose that drove them forward. Staying hidden was no longer an option. The next target had to fall, and they had to strike before the Vorten could regain their balance. Prince Vaylor, second in line to the throne, was no fool like his younger brother. He was a warlord, a strategist who had built his power through conquest and ruthlessness. Unlike Zalric, who had been content to revel in his wealth, Vaylor commanded legions. His personal fleet was unmatched, his fortresses nearly impenetrable. Taking him down required more than stealth, it required spectacle. They set their sights on the War Council, a gathering of the Empire's highest military minds, where Vaylor would be surrounded by his most trusted commanders. It was held aboard the Dominion, a dreadnought the size of a city, armed with enough firepower to reduce entire planets to rubble. Infiltrating it was suicide, so they didn't infiltrate. They walked in the front door. Dressed as high-ranking mercenaries, their new disguises gave them access to the lower levels of the vessel. The air was thick with tension as they moved through the warship's vast corridors, brushing shoulders with warriors who would have torn them apart if they knew the truth. Selene carried a small case, a compact but devastating explosive, the kind that left nothing but atoms in its wake. They reached the observation deck, a towering structure overlooking the planet below. Vaylor stood at the center of the council, his presence undeniable. He was massive, even for a Vorten, his crimson war armor adorned with battle scars. His deep, rumbling voice filled the chamber as he laid out strategies for planetary suppression. He spoke of Earth as if it were already his. Leon met Selene's gaze. No hesitation, no fear. She pressed the detonator. The explosion ripped through the chamber, a controlled, concentrated blast that sent bodies flying. The reinforced glass of the observation deck shattered, venting the room into the void. Sirens howled as emergency bulkheads sealed shut, but the damage had been done. Vaylor survived, barely. His armor had taken the brunt of the blast, but he was on his knees, coughing blood, struggling to rise. Selene strode toward him, stepping over the bodies of fallen officers. She crouched before him, tilting her head. You butchered families. Vaylor bared his fangs, his voice a rasp. You think killing me will stop this war? Leon leveled his rifle. No, but it'll hurt. The shot echoed through the wreckage, and the second heir was dead. They didn't wait for the alarms to fully mobilize the ship's defenses. The escape was brutal. Blaster fire seared past them as they cut through squads of Imperial soldiers, weaving through corridors thick with smoke and panic. The docking bay was in chaos, ships scrambling to launch as the dreadnought's emergency protocols activated. They hijacked a fighter, tearing through the blockade with sheer audacity, disappearing into the depths of space before the full weight of the Empire could come crashing down. By the time the news reached the Emperor's palace, fear had turned to fury. The hunt was no longer about justice. It was about vengeance. The last two targets, the High Chancellor and the Emperor himself, would not wait to be struck down. They would bring the full force of the Empire's wrath upon the assassins. Leon and Celine were running out of time. The Imperial Palace on Vortanis Prime was a fortress beyond imagination. Unlike the decadent estates of the lesser royals, it was built for war. An unyielding colossus of black stone and energy barriers, ringed with orbital defenses that could obliterate an armada before it even reached the atmosphere. Beneath its shadow, the city trembled. The Emperor's will was absolute, and his vengeance was swift. Leon and Celine stood on the balcony of a safe house buried deep in the industrial sector, watching as the Empire bared its fangs. Across the skyline, patrol ships prowled, scanning every alley and rooftop. Troop transports rumbled through the streets, their occupants prepared to tear apart the city to find them. Holoscreens blared their names, their faces marked with a bounty so obscene that even their former allies would consider betrayal. Celine exhaled, running a hand through her hair. They're scared. Leon smirked, adjusting the strap of his rifle. They should be. The assassination of Prince Valor had shattered the illusion of Imperial invulnerability. The War Council was in disarray, the military leadership scrambling to reassert control. But it was not enough. The Emperor still lived, and as long as he drew breath, Earth remained a target. They had one last move to make. The High Chancellor was the last obstacle before the throne. A brilliant tactician and the Emperor's closest confidant, he was the mind behind the systematic eradication of resistance across the galaxy. Killing him was more than revenge. It was a decapitation strike against the Empire's war machine. His stronghold was the Spire, a monolithic tower of steel and glass that loomed above the city like a blade poised to strike. It was a fortress within a fortress, layered with kinetic shielding, automated turrets, and elite guards who would die before allowing harm to befall their master. There was no way in that did not end in death. So they made sure it was someone else's. Through the underworld, they spread a single damning rumor. The High Chancellor had grown weary of the Emperor's rule. He had begun consolidating power, moving pieces into place for a coup. It was a whisper, nothing more. But in a court where betrayal was currency, a whisper was enough. The Emperor responded exactly as expected. The Imperial Guard stormed the Spire at dawn, descending upon the High Chancellor's forces with merciless precision. The city below erupted in chaos as loyalists and suspected traitors turned on one another, their alliances crumbling under the weight of paranoia. Fire and blood stained the sky. Leon and Celine moved through the wreckage like ghosts, slipping past the carnage as the Spire burned from within. The Chancellor, wounded but defiant, had retreated to his private sanctum, a chamber lined with star maps, battle plans, and the remnants of 1,000 conquered worlds. He looked up as they entered, blood trickling from a wound at his temple. He did not beg. He did not run. Celine raised her weapon. This is for the families. The shot was clean. The Chancellor fell. They left his corpse draped over the war table, the maps of his conquests now meaningless. The Empire was crumbling, but the final battle was still ahead. The Emperor, enraged by the betrayal, had retreated into the palace, sealing himself inside with the last of his loyalists. There, within the throne room at the heart of the Imperial Citadel, he would make his stand. Leon and Celine had no intention of allowing him to outlive the dawn. The final approach was madness. The city was ablaze, war unfolding in the streets as factions turned against one another. With their forged mercenary credentials long useless, they fought their way forward, cutting through squads of imperial soldiers, dodging artillery fire as entire buildings collapsed around them. At the palace gates, the last of the emperor's elite stood waiting. Vorten warriors, clad in ceremonial battle armor, their crimson visors reflecting the fires of their dying city. They knew their deaths were inevitable. They fought anyway. The battle was brutal. Blades met armor, gunfire seared flesh. Leon and Celine moved as one, a force of nature that tore through the last guardians of the empire. By the time they reached the throne room, their bodies ached, their weapons ran low, but they stood victorious. The emperor was waiting. He was not a frail ruler, nor a coward hiding behind his guards. He was a warrior king, draped in obsidian battle regalia, his clawed hands gripping a blade wreathed in energy. His eyes burned with something beyond rage, beyond fear. "Humans," he rumbled, "you believe this will end with my death?" Leon wiped blood from his brow. "No." Celine leveled her gun. "But it's a start." The duel was the final act. The emperor fought like a beast unleashed, his strikes shaking the very foundations of the palace. But he was fighting against inevitability. Wounded, exhausted, and enraged, he could not stop them. Leon's knife found the gap in his armor. Celine's bullet ended his reign. The emperor collapsed upon his throne, blood pooling at his feet. The silence that followed was deafening. Outside, the war raged on. The empire did not die in a single night, but its heart had been torn out, its foundation shattered beyond repair. The heirs were dead, the chancellor was gone, and the emperor, the god who had sought to break humanity, had fallen to its wrath. Leon and Celine stood among the ruins of an empire, breathing in the dawn of something new. It was not peace, not yet, but it was an ending, and a beginning.